Hello, dear friends. Today we have an unusual stream, an unusual day, because those who did not sleep last night were watching debates. And today we will have a conversation with, can I turn to you guys as comrade artillerists? Because both Andrei Illarionov and Mikhail Weller in the Soviet Union, they served as in the army as younger officers in the artillery. The caliber today is going to be bigger, but let's start with that. And I think we can start with what happened. Why I, for example, while watching them, was thinking that in my youth and childhood, I do remember dear Leonid Brezhnev of Soviet Union, and he looked much better compared to the current president of the United States. But they were speaking in about the same fashion. So I would be honest with you, dear officers, I had concerns. Why did Trump even agree to these conditions when these two moderators, so viciously pro-left, and they would not probably be just to him, equal to him in terms of this debate. There were no people in the audience. There's a way for a moderator to turn the microphone off, and you technically need to be better prepared to that, but Trump didn't really spend time preparing because he was on his election campaign. But it actually turned out for the better, because the microphones, he could not interrupt Biden, and Biden could present his ability to talk himself into some weird dead end or lose a thought. And there was no audience, so Trump was not distracted by an audience, was not smiling and interacting with them, because when he sees an audience, he usually works with it. And as for moderators, they were pressed so much that they will probably not be equal to both candidates, that they actually held the line and worked all right. And in my view, that debate turned out to be in favor of Trump. We can discuss that in more details, and people are making conclusions. But I would love to hear from you, friends. Andrei, since you are the man of science, the man of numbers, who likes to keep things organized, how do you see the next steps? I don't remember our country being in such a situation. What do we do with this president as we saw him? Good day, Gary. Good day, Mikhail. Very good to be in our company. I do hope that we will have more good reasons to meet and exchange our opinions about the events unfolding. As for the debates, the first presidential debate that happened yesterday in the framework of presidential campaign of 2024, I have several thoughts about it. First is what, dear Gary, you started talking about. Out of two participants, one was holding very honorably, very gentlemanlike, and it was Trump. Probably not too many people expected that behavior from him, but in my opinion, he did hold himself as a presidential candidate and as a real president, which Trump was for the 4 years of his life. He did not interrupt. He behaved himself delicately. He very accurately wasn't even joking. He was ironizing and slightly poking at his opponent, which his opponent was completely lacking. And another important thing, that Trump was continuously bringing up joint problems for the whole United States that are seen as problems by most voters, and about ways to solve them. And his opponent was mostly talking about himself, and sometimes was turning to the personality of his opponent. Biden never, or almost never, talked about joint problems, about bigger problems for the country, bigger problems for the world. He was only talking about himself and at times about his competitor. Third, what we learned, and it was most important for me, I was trying to find for months or even years an answer to the question which I had in my mind. And that's a question that was continuously asked by American congressmen and American senators. What is Biden's plan, and what plan does his administration have in regards to Russian-Ukraine war? About Russia, what's the plan about Ukraine? And as we know, for these months and years, neither Biden nor Biden administration have given an answer. Over 2 months ago, the Chamber of Representatives in Congress, while preparing the project of bill to help Ukraine, had included an article there as a demand to Biden and his administration to prepare during 45 days some plan, the plan that will be used as a roadmap to address Russian aggression against Ukraine. The time for that plan has finished on the 10th of June. And now it is not just a request from congressmen and senators. This is a law of the United States that Biden and his administration do not adhere to. And as a result of them avoiding these questions or even following the bill that was adopted, the demand to understand their main principles in actions in regards to Russia was only growing. And now I think for the first time we heard both Biden's approach and Trump's answer. To be brief, Biden does not have a plan. And that's why he was quiet all these 2.5 years of an open, full-scale, hot aggression of Putin against Ukraine. He has no plan besides allowing Ukraine to bleed. As for Trump managed very concisely to deliver the main points of his plan. First of all, he does have it. Second, he briefly touched upon that, and you can summarize it like this. Trump wants to stop the killing. Trump wants to stop it rapidly, and he wants to stop it without spending more money of American budget. And fourth, most important for those propagandists who continuously pervert Trump's position, he wants to reach that without any territorial concessions for Russia. Trump specifically outlined that Putin was successful at capturing lands under Bush, under Obama, and under Biden. The only president under which Putin did not grab a piece of one of his neighbors was Trump. And he not only formulated this rule, he declared that during debates. And it means that under no terms he would allow this rule to be changed. And finally, the last point I wanted to say about is that we all, just like millions, hundreds of millions of people, both in the United States and around the world, we learned that United States of America is not run by the person who was participating in debates yesterday. I think it became obvious for everybody that Biden has no relation to day-by-day management of the country and to making decisions both internally and in the foreign politics. And then we have a question, actually two of them. First, who in reality is conducting politics in the United States? Sister, give me the name, like in that movie. And second, it became a scream, a moan and a cry of the whole Democratic Party, Democratic-leaning media and their social networks that they do need to replace Biden with somebody. And main words they use, horror, catastrophe, panic, and we need to change him for somebody else before it's too late, because with Biden in this presidential campaign, it's obvious and it's dawning upon Democrats that the next president of the United States will be Donald Trump. And how do you think it is technically doable? How can they replace him? Immediately yesterday and during the whole day today, this discussion is ongoing, and there were some words about the technicality of it. In English, it is called an open convention, basically a congress of Democratic Party, where they announce free acceptance of new candidates, and they can appoint a new candidate at this convention. Understandably, that for the external viewer, this would still be free elections and all, but without any doubt, the major forces within the Democratic Party now are are engaged in a very intensive struggle to find a new candidate instead of Biden. Main names already called. It is not a full list yet, but we already have two names. One is the candidate also known as Mike Obama. And this is how she is called often in these conversations, the spouse of Barack Obama. Very often not Michelle, but Mike, given her personal characteristics. And they're saying that despite that this candidate has no political experience, some people are saying that she's essentially a housewife, especially recently, but since she's a woman of color, and those who know her personally, they're saying that she has both charisma and other personal characteristics that would enable her to be a good candidate. And she is presented as the strongest candidate to run against Trump. Problem is that, at least for now, this Mike Obama has been refusing to participate in this campaign, at least according to her. The second candidate, who has pretty good chances on this campaign, is also the candidate who was in Atlanta yesterday, who was listening to Biden, and to whom over 100 journalists ran at the end of this debate and started asking if he would be presenting his candidacy in the next elections. And this is Governor of California, Governor Newsom, very well known, rather communist style, in my opinion, rather criminal manager, who turned beautiful, fantastic California into the criminal cesspit. So for now we have these two candidates, but it doesn't mean that this list is it. There could be other candidates emerging in the near future, and I think very soon we will learn their names. Right. I'm looking at three of us, guys, and I'm understanding that Mikhail is a little older than myself and Andrei, but I think this age difference only matters when you're maybe 5 and your cousin is 7. Then he is already at school, and the age gap is incredible, and he has nothing to do with you because you're 5 and he is 7. In our case, in our age, these gaps, even if it's 10 years, it's not really a gap. And yesterday when I was looking at Trump and at Biden, between them there is only a 3-year difference. And visually it does seem like 10 or 20 years of age difference, both in behavior, in bodily functions, in motion. And it's interesting how nature is managing all that. But Mikhail, now it's your turn. Your mega mind, from the philosophic point of view, how did we get to such a point when our president, the president of the strongest, biggest, in terms of capabilities, countries in the world, that the world never had anyone alike, that we used to be a beacon for the other countries, how did we find ourselves that a president with our nuclear arms and all the resources we have is not even in the office? And yet we also have a lot of people in the country who still express loudly that he has to stay for 4 more years at the helm. How that is even possible? How can any other animal in the world behave like humans do? All right, Gary, let me start with my personal impressions. First of all, organization was carried out pretty well. Beautiful mode, I think. 2 minutes of conversation, 1 minute to retort, 1 minute to answer the retort, and 1 minute for moderators. And who is not being asked a question, his mic is turned off so he wouldn't interfere. I think this format is brilliant. And second, Biden's entrance. So the entrance of the main acting person, it's a procedure, it's an impression, right? Impression is very important. That impression was very hard. He appeared as some crossbreed between the box of mac and cheese and the mummy of an ancient Egyptian ruler. So it was a skeleton that was making very unsure little steps, slightly hunched to keep the balance better, and he had very thin barely moving hands with even fingers were straight. That shows that his psyche is already weakened. And then you look at his expression of face during the debate, while Trump is a normal person, according to his looks during the debate, and basically, according to his look at his age, actually a giant. And I would follow what Andrei mentioned here. The way I see it, there is always declaratory politics, what is being said for masses, for public opinion, and also there is a side of what is being done in reality. So if we look at what is being done, it is not too difficult to reconstruct the real plan. The plan was not voiced as well. My opinion is not, I'm not a politologist, but Biden has not voiced this plan because there is nothing to voice there. So not voicing the plan actually is a plan. And if we see what happened with Russia and Ukraine during this war, that's an important thing to look at. What is happening with Israel? That's number 2. What is happening with financing Gaza? That's 3. What is happening with Iran and funding of Iran and sanctions against Iran and the activity to continue developing arms-grade uranium, which they already have about 90 kilos, and if you add a little more, they can make a dozen bombs. And if you look at the merging of Russia and China, them getting into each other's orbits, which we should probably concentrate on keeping them apart, which Trump, by the way, was doing at his time. So then we understand that globally America is weakening. And I have a feeling that during the times of my youth, I was still studying at school. There was a phrase started by BBC, Soviet conspiratory government. And it was his early rule of Leonid Brezhnev, the end of 60s. So using that phrase, conspiratory American government has its own plan. And according to this plan, everything is being carried out. So one can presume that since everything was already said, the third cadence of Obama, that 95% of administration, of the current administration are Obama's people, then the relations between Obama and the United States is actually remaining pretty close. You can just speak about that again, but it's rather clear. And starting with an intended vile racial split of the United States, Obama got busy with destruction of the country, of the United States, in order to transition it to the rails of the modern socialism. Let's not talk about egalitarianism and the rest. And this is the real plan. To continue these actions, one needed to have some fake director as a representative, somebody who will pretend, somebody who will portray, will be a full marionette, nothing else. Why have they not found a somewhat more thinking marionette? I have no idea. It's understandable, though, that people driven by career in every field, including politics, they always can agree to compromise about giving some outstanding bonus or outstanding position to somebody whom it is not regretted about. So to not that side or that side, but to this one whom nobody is going to be envious about. And perhaps that would be a principle driven by selecting Biden as a president. Only under serious torture I would agree that 2020's elections were honest and not falsified. And here I have seriously no doubts. Everybody who has a half a brain would understand that. And now how did we get to this? From Hillary Clinton to Obama, the road to Saul Alinsky is very short. He's teaching his 13 principles of radicals, his courses, and from Saul Alinsky, it's really next door to Marxism and socialist revolution in Soviet Union. So here the direction is rather clear. We are building socialism, but not the socialism where the workers only, because socialists already got dissatisfied with the proletariat back in the 20s of the 20th century. Those cunning proletariat does not want to carry on the revolutionary flame to the whole planet. That's why the socialists are betting on other groups, other minorities, national, racial, sexual, and even women. And not even talking about people with limited abilities. But as the result, to continue the whole effort, we need to place white men at their stead, who are the main supposedly cancer point of the world and the white race. So this motion, I think, is obvious. We can see that in the actions of World Economic Forum and World Health Organization and United Nations and everywhere where you can spit, where majority that rules in those orgs are representatives of the countries who, strictly speaking, are not even countries, who got rid of the colonial oppression only because colonies became unprofitable. It had no relation to their liberation fight. And it's easy to conduct any reforms with these folk because, first of all, they're not literate, they're not smart, and they're easy to corrupt. Hello to unforgettable Kofi Annan. How nice and politically correct was he looking, and he managed to steal just quite a bit on his position. He had enough wits to enrich himself at his position. So this line in the United States is continued by dozens of years, starting with roughly 1900s, slowly, from industrialist workers of the world, from anarchist syndicalists in America, from Emma Goldman, if you want, who was from Russia, and then he was expelled later. Marxism was getting stronger, and then it reshaped itself, and it went into the masses. That's when Hitler came to power, and Frankfurt people left Germany for United States and started thinking United States the way they knew how. And that's how we get to 68, the great ideological crisis. The generation of baby boomers came forward, the biggest in numbers, the one that had perspectives which were not seen before in the world history, when students from United States could fly to Europe for holidays. When had that been before? When they could have chosen any training, any specialty, any path in life. But ideologically, the system of free enterprise, which is also known as capitalism, it started growing negative connotations. And they posed it to be ideologically depleted because existing is changing. And from the top of the mountain, all the roads lead you down. And when, in regards to economic, social, and production relations, the system was generally functioning on the level of near perfection, generally everything was done. The only betterments would be in quantitative fashion, maybe getting medicine cheaper, more good jobs available, better credit lines, but principally, there was not much to change left. And that's when the guys came forward who did not know what they wanted, but they knew what they did not want. They did not want to continue the status quo. And for youth of all generations, it's a very typical stance. That's how it should be. This is how live beings are created. They gather in packs, young males, and they rebel against the older males that hold the power in the flock. And this is on the level of social instincts, if you want. They marched. Nobody knew what to do with them after. And since, first of all, in America, this is a society of free entrepreneurship, was giving people the maximum good conditions for life, work, and achieving pursuit of happiness, then why are those who are richer or poorer than others? Why there is disparity in education? Why there is disparity between people who went to college, university, or didn't? We should all be equal. And listen, 2 times I read cover to cover The Theory of Justice by John Ross. I cannot find, I will be hard-pressed to find a more empty book in my life. I was trying to understand what's the core of it. It's very simple, really, to take it away and to split equally. Everything else is cheap speculations that do not withstand any critique. That became the main political book of modern political philosophers to be studied in American universities. Therefore, those who are following the road of equalizing everybody by results, not by capabilities, or opportunities. Because after MLK, speaking of rights and opportunities, that was already achieved in the United States. There, starting since 1969, roughly, one was hard-pressed to find racism. And this pendulum started swinging in a different direction. It was important to show that everybody must be equal. And since then, that's when the destruction of science started, because modern understanding about sexual deviances, about lack of racial differences, and the like, this is anti-science heresy. This has nothing to do with truth. This is the case when ideology is propped above science, above truth, above practice, above everything else. And attacking of James Watson by idiots who refuse to understand anything, this is one of the shameful moments of modern civilization, and American in particular. Who is James Watson and who are they? And I think this is maybe the only... Oh no, Alisher Usmanov, the Russian tycoon, had two good moments. First of all, he was funding Russian gymnastics because of his love to Irina Wiener. And second, he bought on the auction a Nobel Prize of Watson and returned it back to him. And I think that's the pinnacle of his life achievements. So, Gary, you as an American, I consider you to be, you know it better than I do. When President Johnson, seems like everybody was greeting that, from the bottom of his heart decided to help single mothers. And right, it was packaged as a good idea, sure. And as a result, back then, American blacks, there was no even a word African American. And that N-word was not shamed, was not attacked. And the Huckleberry Finn and the Uncle Tom's Hut were not being blamed for many things. And African Americans were being born in full families in those days. Now, these days, 3/4 of them are being born to single mothers. Because if you materially support the situation when there is no family, of course, the family will be broken and kids will be growing without fathers. And they would not have those limiting mechanisms. They would not have, on the level of biology, examples. They don't have hero figures. And they're much easier to be swayed to become thugs and prostitutes than kids from normal good families. And this is the path that America was led to. Everything that was done by the system of education, if we fail to make the dumb ones smarter, then let's lower the barrier to make sure that the smart ones are not smart. This is how it was when, tragically, from a 4-time overdose of fentanyl, a criminal known by name of George Floyd, I don't quite remember in which legal school, almost Harvard, but I don't want to be wrong here. Students demanded of the professor of one of their disciplines, white students, demanding that he would not be examining their African American students' counterparts, but would give them grades without an exam because they're very concerned about the death of George Floyd. So, one moment here. You first acknowledge that your peers are dumber, and you're also sending a message to everybody outside that these people will leave this university with weaker diplomas and poorer knowledge. Nobody was even smart enough to bring the question up in this fashion, because dumbing down as an organized process, it was there, rather successful for quite a while, and continues now. Therefore, talking and speaking up the truth became not only offensive but also immoral, became criminal in some cases, antisocial, and for speaking the truth, one could be fired from his job, expelled from society, even though it could be a perfect truth. It's not important. It doesn't meet the dogmas, because in the science of races, they devised the term scientific racism. And okay, it's a science, but it contradicts our anti-racial views. And that leads to the most horrible things. Because what is a lie? Lie is a distortion of reality and distortion of feedback. As I said, any plant, any animal is getting adequate information from the environment, is getting the proper right feedback. The simplest example, the hare is getting information about a wolf. It hears some motion, maybe sounds, and it's trying to sit still. The wolf, when it's hunting the hare, it knows that sweat glands are on the bottom of its paws. He's looking for that smell. And he knows that if he is not going to find the bunny, that hare, he will die of hunger. And the hare knows that if he is discovered, he'll be eaten. And in this struggle, two systems, two types coexist. If you give wrong information to one or the other, they will die. Same with humanity. If you continue feeding humanity false information about which people are good and which people are bad, about which political movements lead to prosperity and which ones lead to disaster and death, this will only lead to catastrophes. And the best example of catastrophe is a history of Soviet Union. I'm still missing, and I try to read Marx's Capital from the beginning, from the middle, from the end, from all different places. I could not understand. And those 3 volumes that Engels concocted, I'm not even talking about. But the first volume, The Theory of Added Value, it is not worth the paper it's written on. It was understandable to any peasant, to any master who was making anything in the medieval, that when you're selling anything, it should be more expensive than the components it is made of, because otherwise you will die. Because for that difference, you need to stay alive and feed your family. How could that be trumpeted as economic discovery? I do not understand. And since the economic schools of von Hayek and von Mises was established, it is a shame to talk about Marx as an economist. This is just signing off that you're an idiot when you talk about him in these terms. But a lot of people still think that he is. And I would say Bulgakov in his moments was a genius when he described that, to take it away and to share between everybody. And that takeaway was surrounded by a principle of holiness, because if it is not equal, this is social injustice. And after that, we can see where it goes to. They have not really tried socialism, but they're definitely planning to make it right this time. And everything will be fine, as they promise. And for those who are supposedly oppressed, the oppressors are always horrible, and the ones below, the ones oppressed, are always right. And that's what they're suggesting. In that logic, if Arabs in Palestine are living poorer than the Jews, then the Jews are scoundrels because they're the oppressors, and Arabs are the victims because they are the oppressed. Because if there was justice, then everybody would be living equally. And this is very simple mechanics that they're propping up. And so in the United States, starting roughly 1968, this motion was gathering more and more momentum, going the way described by those comrades from Frankfurt. I'm not even talking about Lukács, Fromms, and the others. There is also Gramsci, who was an Italian, but it would be better if he was not be born. And that movement, that group, was widening to give everything to the oppressed and to declare the oppressors, or those who are more successful, to be evil. And then people of the most concerned nationality, the most active psychic energy, sorry, Gary, the Jews, they participated actively in this. Marx was a Jew, by the way. Saul Alinsky was a Jew. Trotsky was a Jew. Without him, there would be no October Revolution or communist victory in the Civil War in Soviet Union. If the Jews will not be talking about it, then anti-Semites will blame them tenfold for all that, which is actually happening left and right. And we did mention Emma Goldman, but regardless, the role of that group of society in the socialist movement in the United States was definitely outstanding, and still is. And digging in, figuring out whom to blame, then, for example, we can bring up David Axelrod, and so that he would not be bored, get David Remnick as well. I would send them in the first line in that direction, because, yes, Axelrod was the head of election campaign of Obama. Here is your Obama. Here is your 7th of October in Israel. This is all starting back from Axelrod in recent years, who was pushing Obama. And not him alone. They were, I don't remember which of these African-American Democrats in Congress were pushed by a Jewish society. Was it Rashida Tlaib or another one equally disgusting proponent of world equality? And when I wrote about the Jews having actual significant note in destruction of human civilization, there was a lot of screams coming at me when I published the book. And all that movement was developing about attacking the successful and propping up the oppressed. And here, socialism fantastically meets globalism. And fighters for equality join with oligarchs, because fighters for equality are usually rather not smart. And oligarchs are seldom ever not smart. In order to make your billions and to retain that, one needs to be cynical, deep, rich mind, and knowledge of human psychology. Without that, you will not succeed. Oligarchs know it very well that economic socialism breeds dictatorship, and the one standing at the helm of the country is the one distributing everything, and he is the owner of everything. And this is how, if we are all paying to them, we become at the top of the mechanism of distribution. So if we're funding all these groups, we are at the top. Then we can destroy the middle class, we can put more people on subsidies, we'll make them poor and raise the prices on fuel. We'll decrease the level of production. Let's remove plants and factories out beyond the border to Mexico, China, anywhere. And we'll be paying you government subsidies, and you'll be voting and doing everything we tell you. That's why immigrants coming across the border are looked upon as favorable group, because they are eager to do anything that's asked of them for a small give. Similarly, in Russia, there are tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Muslims migrating to Russia. They are also in the same position to the Russian government currently. They don't care about Moscow, but they are ready to support locals if they're asked and given certain grants. And as for Putin and his gang, he doesn't give a shit what happens to the country after his rule. So we're getting back to United States. It was following that direction because when, according to the advice of Frankfurt School of Socialism, the newspapers, television, and universities were captured, they started polishing the brains. And that's how we get to the point where Barack Obama is fantastic. Nobody cares whether he was born on the territory of the United States, why in his birth certificate there is a hospital indicated which did not exist at the year when he was born. That is forbidden, of course, because all that is a tax on his personality. And neo-socialist group has acquired power in the country. They need veneers, and they always like veneers, and they will be ruling in the meantime. And this is overall Soros buying district attorneys and judges, Gates funding to big projects, Big Pharma that was making billions on the Chinese virus. A drunken hedgehog could understand that the virus from Wuhan laboratory, funded by United States, caused it. And there was so much lie and attacks on people who are trying to bring the truth. And here we get to the moment when the parody of a human is being presented by a cardboard figure on the stage who has nothing to do with running the country, because conspiratory socialist government is actually doing that. And that's my message for today. Well, Mikhail, thank you. I'm looking at the three of us, and of course between your passion and mine and Andrei's numbers, we are a pretty good trio. And I'm probably the most laid back of you all. Well, that's your profession, Gary. That's your job, right? That's your military work was around that too. We cannot match you there. Right, I was holding myself when you were talking about Jews, since I'm the member of that nation. But they are changing today, I need to say. They are starting to think. Let me interject a little bit. 1 second. My favorite quote here from the beautiful children's book, Sabatini, Captain Blood's Odyssey. Just like majority of mortals, least of all, Captain Levasseur was interested in learning the truth about himself. Oh, Michael, you are incorrigible. But still, they actually are starting to think about the attacks and the real Holocaust that was on the horizon, planned for Israel. So there is some electricity finally hitting this lamp to our Jewish Democrats. But when you touched upon Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels as the economists, I was watching the face of Andrei Illarionov very carefully, but he did keep his poker face. He did not show any emotions in this regard, because I think he could have said something about the great Marx as an economist, speaking in very satirically here, right? Because the economy has to be economical. I cannot argue here, Gary, with Andrei, because among us two, he's the economist. There's nothing I can do about that. I can only express my humble opinion of somebody who likes to read. Well, listen, I heard he's a pretty good economist too. But Mikhail, if I am to be serious, among the people that communicate with me, many people are concerned that Trump may be assassinated, that the Bolsheviks in the US will not let him get to power, that we will have some dark times, that it all may lead to some form of civil war or something like that. And in your mind, do you think it is possible? Do you think this is a probability for us in the future, that we may have some conflict? And they're basically trying to, and they were rather successful in scaring people in Ukraine that Trump is a dictator, that there'll be another war, a nuclear war under him, and it's the second time over. So there are people who cannot be convinced by facts, and they would do everything in their power to prevent him ascending to power. And there are others who actually would not agree to anybody but him. So what are your thoughts? I think that right now, many people do think that it's probable. Many people think that some states will initiate some sort of secession. Others think that, well, good luck to Trump and let him live a lot more years. There's nothing new, really. The opinions on the whole sphere were already expressed time and time again. But I think, considering the experience of the last 3.5 years of Biden and 4 years of Trump before that, in case if, or rather be ready for, that there may be a last chance right now. We may not get the second chance if Trump loses. I would say that everybody needs to be voting or out in the streets and knowing that there'll be a serious rebellion on their hands. They may reconsider. And people need to understand they either need to be very active about their position, or they will eventually lose their right to bear arms, their right to resist, their right to express their opinion. They are already encroaching on your freedom of speech, which is somewhat in a deep past right now. The wrong thing, or not politically correct thinking, is very often severely punished these days. And unless you want to convert to Soviet Union citizens who were free only to express their opinion under the blanket with their wife or quietly in the kitchen in the family, you need to be out there voting. And also protest. If things go wrong, make sure you go protest, because nobody will be executing commands. The generals and enforcement agencies will not be doing that if everybody will be out in the streets. Or if we'll see more craze with these idiots with vaginas on their heads, with those Antifa thugs and other three-letter abbreviations, one can then smoke a cigarette knowing that there's really nowhere to run. Because in New Zealand, they got the same scoundrels at the government, not even talking about Australia. The planet is round and there are no more corners. Japan, good country, but they don't like immigrants. And that's about it, unfortunately. That's the harsh reality. Who had thought back in 1935 that there'll be 1939, 1944? Very few, right? I absolutely agree with you, Mikhail. And I keep bringing Germany as a good example. Just in several years, and Germany as a most progressive country at the first third of the 20th century, that just in a few years, the professor who taught you all of a sudden became an enemy. The doctor who treated you and your family all of a sudden became an enemy. All the writers, all the producers, all the artists, they all were deemed enemies. Just in 10 years, Goethe and many of the scientists, and yeah, they were expunged or attacked. Andrei, what's your opinion? Do you think in our country we can have something like that? Because if that starts here, it will have a chaos effect on the whole world, I think. You know, Gary, I would use here a chance and an impressive review that Mikhail has made for us today to continue and develop that idea. Because what is happening now in the United States is not only and not just a political fight. For 1 year or 4 years for the next presidency, it's not only ideological fight. Of course, those components are valid and they definitely are there. But this is a global civilizational clash between two principally different systems of existence of humanity. And it turned out so that about 1,000 years ago, at least, about 700 years ago, it was really shaped and took over other civilizations, a very unique thing that has not happened before, so-called Western civilization. It appeared in the northwestern Europe, closer to the end of the 10th century. By the 13th century, it became obviously more advanced and more successful and more competitive than other civilizational options. And in the years that followed, the next 500 years, essentially, it demonstrated its success, its effectiveness, compared to all other examples that existed in the world or in the history. And everything that surrounds us today, everything that we're using, everything that we're enjoying, and thanks to what we, all of us here, are in this virtual studio, and those millions, hundreds of millions of people who are outside of our studio but have a chance to watch us, and also enjoying the right to life, essentially. These are the results of Western civilization. And what is the main differentiating factor of it from the others? And the main difference is meritocracy. Meritocracy implies that power, success, and opportunity is transferred to those who can work, those who can think, those who can create. Power, respect, position in society is given to a person for his or her merit. This is the core of meritocracy. In many other societies, this was missing. And what is happening now in the Western societies at large, which grew up on this, which are created on this principle, which became successful because of this principle, now they have a completely contradictory idea, which can be named using a well-known English word, moronocracy or idiocracy. Moron in this way, for those who don't speak English, is an idiot. This is the power of idiots. Completely opposite to what is embodied in the term meritocracy. And all the mechanisms which were ever devised by humanity to destroy those who are successful, talented, gifted, are now attacking meritocracy. This new system that is emerging is now attacking meritocracy. And the end result of it would be just one, the destruction of Western civilization. And Mikhail gave us a deep dive into the perspectives and historic background. But what we're seeing in the last few years or decades in the United States and recent years, looking at the pogroms initiated by BLMs in 2020, by what is being instituted by current Biden administration and what was launched by Obama administration, these are very sequential, very well thought actions aimed at destroying the Western civilization on the example of the United States. That's why the coming elections today, this year, are not only about choosing one candidate over another, one party over another party, one political position against the other position, one ideology against the other. No, not that. This is the choice whether we are keeping Western civilization or destroying it. And the choice is being represented by two persons who participated in presidential debates yesterday. And behind the back of each of them, there is a team and ideology. And behind Biden, there is that whole team and ideology aimed at destroying the Western civilization, which actually hates the Western principles. And they hate it in the deepest way possible. And they're using any tools, any anti-Western forces. They're trying to aggregate and coordinate them, including the ones inside the United States of America, to the forces outside, like Hamas, Hezbollah, Putin, North Korea, to make a severe blow to that civilization and in hopes to destroy it. That's why the choice for the citizens of the United States and the choice for the whole world is whether this unique experiment of the Western civilization, which was the one that granted us our modern human civilization on this planet, whether this will continue or whether it will be buried. Right. It would be horrible to see that stop on us or end on us. And I know people are bringing examples of South Africa, Rhodesia, and some other states that changed their course drastically. I'll probably review our stream that we did today another 3 times because I would love to hear again, comrade artillerists, what you've said today using your biggest caliber. And I would advise our listeners to do the same, because every time when I'm listening to these two friends of mine, I learn of something new and I understand things deeper. And I think all of our viewers today, all of our friends, our families who will be watching us, they will have a lot to think through, a lot to process. Because it will be just horrible if everything that our forefathers have built, setting up this civilization, our country, United States of America, that we have not preserved it, that we, upon getting here and getting this gift in our hands, and I have a couple of very expressive Russian words to what we are currently doing with this country, but I hope we start thinking. And as Mikhail said, we'll need to come out. First, we need to come out in November to vote. Make sure we volunteer, come out as observers to the election stations. And there's a whole team, a whole network that is being created by Laura Trump to do essentially that. So those who want to participate, those who want to contribute, just Google it, Laura Trump Elections Initiative, and let's dedicate a day or two to try to prevent what we were talking about. And I do hope we meet again when Trump announces his vice president candidate, so we can talk about perhaps a bright future that we have as an opportunity if we use it. And it's an honor for me to be in the same team with you, in the same studio, albeit virtual, but it's really very precious to me. And if you guys have nothing else to say today, we can conclude this stream. Gary, I think we should also find a way to have a drink, have a toast to our victory. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Mikhail. And I do have an idea, which I think after this stream we can discuss in private, and perhaps we can make it a reality. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, comrades. And happy 4th of July from Privateer Station.